Por que a pressão internacional é de extrema importância? Quando você tem a comunidade internacional sabendo de fato o que está acontecendo, fica mais difícil para que eles possam vender as ilusões deles para o mundo.
Elon Musk reagiu a uma prisão de um manifestante de 8 de janeiro, ao mesmo tempo que parlamentares e exilados brasileiros cumprem agenda na capital dos Estados Unidos. Olá, amigos do canal Vista Pátria, eu sou a Débora. Para você que é novo aqui nesse canal, eu sou esposa do Alan Frutuoso e estou diariamente aqui exercendo a função dele de jornalista, já que todos vocês sabem, o Alan está impossibilitado de exercer a função dele por conta de medidas cautelares. Por esse motivo, diariamente eu faço um apelo a todos vocês que puderem colaborar com o nosso link da vaquinha para que a gente possa pagar os custos advocatícios para a defesa do Alan Frutuoso, meu esposo. Se vocês puderem ajudar, desde já agradeço. Tem o link do primeiro comentário e o Pix que aparece aqui na tela.
Porque, infelizmente, nós não temos uma imprensa, nem no Brasil, nem fora dele. O que nós temos são tentativas de crescimento. As pessoas precisam aprender a financiar as imprensas brasileiras, de direito, todas. Esse financiamento não vai vir de milionários, não vai vir de empresários com muito dinheiro, vai vir de vocês. Né? Vocês têm que ajudar os jornais brasileiros a crescer, para que essa documentação ela possa esclarecer os congressistas americanos e os líderes políticos mundiais a entender de fato o que está acontecendo no Brasil.
Todo dia nós falamos sobre anistia aqui no canal e parece que Elon Musk, simplesmente o homem mais rico do mundo e um ferrenho defensor das liberdades, resolveu reagir à prisão do jovem sorocabano condenado a 17 anos por participar das manifestações do 8 de janeiro. O influente empresário afirmou que, ao menos que me falte alguma coisa aqui, a punição é muito superior ao crime. O Supremo Tribunal Federal definiu a pena de 17 anos, sendo 15 de prisão e 2 de detenção para Wellington Luiz, um motoboy trabalhador. Uma das justificativas para condená-lo foi o de ele ter comemorado a tomada dos prédios públicos. Prestem atenção, ele não foi acusado de quebrar nada, mas sim de comemorar. Ele estava no topo do Congresso e tinha ingressado como turista. O simples fato dele ter balançado a bandeira do Brasil no topo do prédio lhe rendeu uma pena maior que a de muitos traficantes. Wellington afirmou o seguinte: trabalho desde meus 12 anos de idade, sou gerador de emprego e não um criminoso. Segundo as leis que estão sendo aplicadas a mim, um traficante ou assassino tem mais direito que eu. Sou inocente, apenas exerci meu direito de levantar a bandeira do meu país ao ponto mais alto de Brasília, com total permissão das autoridades que estavam ali naquele local. Não quebrei absolutamente nada, muito pelo contrário. Filmei os que realmente estavam fazendo qualquer dano ao patrimônio público. Fui condenado pelo Supremo por razões sem qualquer provas, com viés político. Pessoas como Wellington passarão anos dentro de uma prisão e mais uma vez reafirmo aqui, a anistia é a coisa mais importante do momento. O Wellington não tem tempo para ficar esperando. Ele está sendo encaminhado para um presídio para ficar 17 anos. Vocês têm noção do que são 17 anos dentro de uma prisão? Essas pessoas precisam de ajuda imediatamente. A pauta da anistia deveria estar na boca dos parlamentares e do próprio presidente Bolsonaro dia e noite. Mas essa repercussão do Elon Musk só foi possível por conta do forte trabalho de divulgação no exterior sobre a juristocracia vigente no Brasil. Muitos perfis estão divulgando em língua inglesa o que ocorre aqui no Brasil. Como nós vimos aqui no canal Vista Pátria, no vídeo de segunda-feira, a audiência na Comissão de Direitos Humanos dos Estados Unidos foi adiada por conta de uma manobra de um deputado ligado ao presidente da Colômbia, o ex-guerrilheiro Gustavo Petro. Esse adiamento não impediu que parte da comitiva fosse a Washington DC e cumprisse a agenda na divulgação do que vem ocorrendo aqui no Brasil. O jornalista Alan dos Santos explanou o seguinte na OEA.
Because not just her, who is a judge, but you can ask all the experts in law in Brazil, and they will explain to you what is happening. People are being judged by the Supreme Court before any judge. They go directly to the Supreme Court. There's no crime. Crime of opinion does exist in Brazil. But he wrote it. In my order of arrest, Justice Alexandre de Moraes wrote crime of opinion for the United States government. He is insane because he is a justice of the Supreme Court. What the legislator can do against him? Nothing, because they cannot ask for impeachment of the Supreme Court, because in Brazil you cannot start that at the House of the Representative. Only the Senate can do that. But all the senators, all of them, do not want to do this. It's easy to understand why. Because all of them have some crimes being investigated by the Supreme Court. So if they start an impeachment process, they will be charged somehow. So the Senate, that would be the only one answer that we would have in Brazil. But they are cowards. The House cannot do anything. The executive power, it's lovely, happy what for everything that's happening right now, and we are here, desperate. So the Senate could solve this problem, but they won't. And they will not. They definitely will not solve this problem. But we need to denounce what is happening. Poor people, homeless, journalists, senators, justice, all these people organizing a coup d'etat. It's a joke. It's a totally joke. So we need to at least say we cannot accept this stupidity just because that works through the bureaucracy. Doesn't make sense to me. Just because it's working through the bureaucracy, we need to accept it. The guy they told right now, Cleston, he died in prison because he needed to get medication and medical treatment. And even the
Prosecutor General.
Even the Prosecutor General said that he needs to be treated right now. But Alexandre de Moraes,
2.5 months of release order, and he ignored it, and he died.
he ignored it and the guy died. And guess what? He didn't commit any crime. There's a video proving that he wasn't in there. I mean, I don't want to take more time. It's just, it's very obvious. There's no due process in Brazil. None of us can access all the papers. I don't know how to say that in English.
Accusation.
The file.
The files.
Yeah, the file. We cannot access that. We do not know what kind of crime we are answered for, and we do not know anything.
Because there is no crime.
Yeah, there's
There
no
is
crime.
no crime. That's the truth.
But
They
there is
invented.
But there is a very interesting point. I'm a journalist. Some news company, news media in Brazil, they know the files. They can access some part of the files that even the lawyers cannot. Only if they will kind of approve what the Supreme Court is doing. If they criticize, like that journalist over there, Paulo, is Paulo here?
No.
If they criticize, they find some way to fire these journalists or destroy that company like they did with my company. I denounced a wiretapping in Brazil in the nighttime prime with the second largest TV in Brazil, Record TV. After that, my life was destroyed just because I report. This is documented, very well documented. When the journalists of the TV Record asked Alexandre de Moraes, China Embassy, North Korea Embassy, and Barroso what they would answer about the papers I reported, they said, we have nothing to say. That was the answer, period. And after that, my life was destroyed. That's the answer. Using bureaucracy to destroy our lives.
Também teve uma coletiva de imprensa, a qual a imprensa mainstream resolveu ignorar, mas tinham canais da imprensa alternativa que expuseram os discursos de Paulo Figueiredo e parlamentares.
My Brazilian passport was canceled and my bank accounts were frozen by order of the Supreme Court Justice Alexandre de Moraes. 10 days later, under Lula da Silva, the Brazilian Department of Justice launched an investigation against the network I worked for, Jovem Pan, whom you all know, which then fired all the conservative commentators, including my colleagues Marco Antônio Costa and Gerson Gomes, who are actually here in the audience today. The persecution recently escalated with a ridiculous claim that I had participated in a coup simply by accurately reporting on the behind-the-scene activities of the Brazilian armed forces. This is called reporting, journalism. The legacy media should try it sometime. I have been living in the United States for the better part of a decade, but now it's different. I live in exile, unable to return to my homeland. I wish I could say I'm the only one in this situation, but I'm not. Dozens of journalists are being persecuted, with several also exiled here in the U.S. I must mention the notable case of journalist Alan dos Santos, present here in the audience, whose arrest was ordered by Justice Moraes for crimes of opinion, and the extradition denied by the United States government.
Brazil is no longer a democracy. More than half of the congressmen also believe that, also understand that, but they are afraid to act. And the reason they are afraid to act is because the moment we try to pass a bill, giving back to Congress the leadership or the right to pass bill or to legislate, we immediately suffer intimidation. Phone calls from ministers of the justice harassing and threatening congressmen if they don't do exactly what the Supreme Court says. So I'm here today representing the leader of the opposition, Carlos Jordi, who was not able to be here today, representing Daniel Silveira, a congressman who was also arrested, and many others. Carla Zambelli, who cannot be here today because her passport was seized. This can no longer continue the way it is. And to finish, I would like you to take a look at the faces of all my friends who are here beside me today. These brave men and women. These people now are at risk of the moment we set foot back in Brazil, we can be arrested, we can suffer search and seizure, we can have our lives destroyed. Why? Because of corruption? Because we steal public money? No. Because we're fighting for a real democracy.
The Supreme Court's president at the time, Dias Toffoli, an alleged participant in the bribing scheme, decided to censor Cruzoé magazine and opened an investigation accusing them of spreading fake news. Justice Toffoli appointed Justice Alexandre de Moraes to become the rapporteur judge of the case. The investigation, actually an inquisition, has the Supreme Court as an alleged victim, investigator, and judge at the same time. It is still open 5 years later and has been weaponized to persecute anyone whom the court itself understands to be criticizing it or opposing the views of its members. The number of people criminally prosecuted, or should I say more accurately, persecuted, by Justice Moraes and the court amount to thousands of Brazilians right now. Some of those here, some of those can't return to the country.
Towards the ultimate goal to imprison my father, the president who dared to put the interests of Brazilians first. My father is now prosecuted and slandered in the most various ways. As in every tyranny, the limit of the ridiculous no longer exists. And he even faces the accusation of having committed the terrible crime of disturbing a whale.
Brazilians have been subject to human rights violations committed by Brazilian officials on a very large scale. Documented or credibly reported rights violations in Brazil include the political abuse of legal procedures to persecute political opposition, including jailing opposition figures on spurious charges, violations of freedom of speech and media freedom, including persecution of journalists, the silencing of opposition media, the banning of individuals from social media, thinly veiled censorship laws claiming to fight so-called disinformation, and many violations of the rule of law and judicial malfeasance. Already in December of 2022, Mary O'Grady, who writes a weekly column on Latin America for the Wall Street Journal, noted the danger, and she said, and I quote her in part, "A greater threat is the 11-member Supreme Court, which is overstepping its jurisdiction and flouting the rule of law for political reasons without consequences. When the highest court becomes an ally of ideological and corrupt politicians, democracy is in grave danger. Brazil has arrived at such a moment," she goes on. "The court censored other political speech from business leaders, elected members of Congress, and news and entertainment platforms on the right. This has been carried out with assistance from Electoral Tribunal's Special Advisory to combat disinformation. It acts as a ministry of truth, so-called."
Esse movimento continua e o próximo passo é derrubar a obstrução do deputado Jim McGovern e finalmente realizar a audiência no Congresso americano. Isso será mais difícil do mainstream ignorar. Ressalto aqui a coragem dos que discursaram em Washington, D.C., pois o conteúdo da fala deles hoje em dia é motivo de prisão aqui no Brasil. Obrigada a todos vocês que nos assistiram até aqui. Não esqueça de verificar se você está inscrito nesse canal. Se você gostou desse vídeo, deixe o seu joinha. Até a próxima. Tchau, tchau.